Now picture this. It's a little after dusk. There's a group of kids. They've all got smiles on their faces and this look of wonderment as they look at fireflies. By the way, I call them lightning bugs, and you may too. But then, with a burst of energy, they're all running around and chasing them. Now, if you've ever seen fireflies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I tell people all the time I believe in magic. I even have a shirt that says it. You see, I'm a big kid at heart, and I really do believe in magic. And lightning bugs? That's proof there's magic in the world. In today's episode, Sara Lewis joins me, and she brings magic to the For Real podcast. She's a founding member of Fireflies International. She's a co-chairs with the Firefly Specialist Group. She's the author of Silent Sparks, The Wondrous World of Fireflies, and just so much more. Now, did you know the fireflies spend most of their life in the ground, and really they only share the magic for a very short period of time? Did you know that the blinking they have, well, they all have their own kind of little style of blink, and it's their way of finding a mate. It's kind of a mating ritual, so to speak. Now, there's over 2,000 different species of fireflies, and those blinkers they have, they actually come in a bunch of different colors. And lastly, there's some really serious concern that fireflies may lose their magic as they're threatened by a series of things, but there's some things we can do to save this magic. So get ready as Sara becomes the conductor for their magic show, and I know you're going to have sparkles in your eyes and a huge smile on your face as Sara takes us on this magical journey.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Markakyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today is a magical one, and the person bringing the magic is Sara Lewis. Sara, welcome to the show, and I'm really excited about today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Well, this subject for me is, I think probably, and you're probably really familiar with it because I'm sure you talk to people that tell you the same thing all the time. It brings back all your childhood memories. So for me, it's great.
Excellent. Totally. Yeah. Childhood.
Yep. And all that time. So what I typically do is I get into your background so everybody gets to know you a little bit. By the way, when I was doing some of my homework on this thing, you didn't go to any slouch schools at all, did you? It's kind of unbelievable the schools you went to. It's pretty cool.
It's, being in the right place at the right time, kind of looking at it there.
Did you grow up on the East Coast originally?
I did. I was born in Connecticut.
Okay, cool. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about you going to school, what you were studying, and what brought you to today's subject on fireflies. But let's do a little bit of your journey, and then we'll get to the magic.
Yeah, sure. So, everybody always asks me, how I got interested in fireflies. And I think I must be one of the only people in the world who has no recollection of fireflies at all from when I was a kid.
Really?
I have no recollection of fireflies. I don't think I ever saw one when I was a kid, although they're all over the East Coast, as you say. But,
right.
Yeah. So, I grew up ignorant of fireflies, and only, came around later in life. But I grew up in a small town outside of New Haven in Connecticut, the youngest of 4 kids, and we were really lucky because we were kind of wild, and as the youngest, I got to be the wild child, and so It was a time, growing up in the 1950s and 60s when kids played outside all the time,
Sure.
We're gone for hours just playing in the woods. And so, I kind of, also as the youngest, I always felt like I was kind of ignored. And so, I found my refuge in hanging out in the forest, in tide pools by the ocean, lakes and streams, waterfalls, just looking under rocks, that kind of thing. So, and I think, my parents, as I said in the the dedication of a book I wrote on fireflies called Silent Sparks. My parents, I dedicated it to my parents
Oh, that's
who
cool.
fed us wonder as when we were very young. They just let us wander and wonder. And, they tried to keep up with us and answer our questions, but they were always very encouraging of our interest in the natural world, and that was a very special thing. So, having that freedom growing up, I think was a big deal. And I don't know. I feel like I was maybe 8 or 9 years old when I realized that I wanted to be a biologist when I grew up.
Wow.
And because I was always interested in the natural world, I like rocks, they're fine and stuff like that, but really interested in the living world. And so I never really had any question in my mind, like what I was going to be. That was also like a very lucky thing. I know a lot of people, kind of cast around for things that they love to do. And I was lucky because I knew it from the very beginning, really, and have never looked back. So, let's see. Yeah, I was interested in biology in high school. In college, I actually specialized in biology, but it was always kind of I felt like a little bit of a tension because like anything, you're taking courses and you're like learning all these facts and all these characteristics of different animals and stuff. And I got very, very interested in college in art and in photography. So I took a bunch of drawing classes. I am a very lousy drawer, but not a bad photographer. And so, that combination of sort of studying biology and conveying the facts and learning the facts, and studying art, which I felt really conveys the wonder. So that was like a magical combination for me. The combination of understanding how the biological world works in a sort of mechanistic way, but then also appreciating and really feeling in a very deep sense the wonder of that biological world. So for me, that's always been, kind of what keeps me going, right? And it has been a journey
Yeah.
in terms of, being a practicing academic scientist where, to a certain extent, you learn to kind of toe the party line, and you don't really talk too much about to your students about wonder, because like you're supposed to talk to them about facts and science. And so it wasn't until pretty recently, about like 2015, something like that, that I began to think, like there's a bigger world out there, and there's so many people who appreciate these creatures, fireflies in particular, and it's really important to me to be able to convey my own sense of wonder about them to people. And so I feel like I kind of came out of the scientific closet in about 2015. I wrote the popular science book, gave a TED talk. And to me, that was like, whoa, this is so cool. I actually get to talk about wonder. So for me, that was a very kind of a important transition.
Well, let me interject a couple things. First off, I know you're a professor now too, and so you're teaching to younger students now, correct?
I actually, in 2022, which is just a few years ago,
Mhm.
retired from teaching at Tufts University. So I am a professor emeritus.
Okay.
So I get to keep that title, and library privileges, stuff like that. But I retired in order to spend more time doing firefly conservation,
Sure.
which is not something that is really, it's not an academic pursuit. Exactly. It's more of a kind of the conservation work that I do is more, it's a volunteer job, and it's something that I do just because I think that fireflies are pretty amazing. there's a need to for people to come together who know about them to come together and to work together to try to identify which fireflies need to be protected.
Okay, so what I was thinking though, so it hasn't been that long since you were teaching. So my question for you is, and I had the same upbringing. I bring it up every now and then because I have a brother's. It's funny is you're the youngest of four. I'm the oldest of five, and the younger ones
Mhm.
they always get away with everything because your parents are exhausted. They
Totally.
took care of the older ones and that. So
Yeah.
you got away with it, but the question I have is that I got to go in the woods and explore and do all those things too.
Mm.
Especially here in the U.S. and I can't speak for other countries. I don't know that kids get to do that as much. And did you find when you were a professor with these kids that are now that probably didn't have the same
Mm.
and by the way, I'm a big fan of you use two words that I use all the time, magic and wonder. You use it all the time too. Are you
Mm.
finding that the kids today, because we got to live kind of in imaginary worlds a little bit,
Mhm.
do they get to have that as much as we did?
That's so interesting, it really is, and, yeah, I'm so glad that you bring that up. I it's not that I saw it in the college kids that I taught, but, when we were raising our own kids, who were born in, like, the 1990s,
Right,
they were yeah, it was amazing to me, like, how little time they their friends got to play outside,
right.
they'd be outside, but they'd be playing soccer, or they'd be outside, they'd be playing T-ball, or, Little League, or something like that, so, every activity that they had was very structured, and I think that's typical for kids
Right.
these days, and I don't know you know, honestly, I don't know where that whole trend came from. But you're right. I felt like, they were kind of losing the opportunity to just be outside and dream, and explore and build forts and do all that stuff. So, of course, we always tried to do that with our kids, and I like to think that our kids have, we have two boys, and I like to think that, yeah, they grew up with an appreciation for the magic of the natural world. But you're right. I think that it's something that's being lost, and in many communities, I see and I talk to people. It's like they're afraid to let their kids go outside, without some kind of supervision, adult supervision, and so that really seems like something that in America, at least, we've really lost.
I want to get an example of something that's relative but not relative at the end of the day. And by the way, I say this in every episode. My mind goes all over the place, so I apologize if I don't stay on track because I'm
No problem. I like going off track.
well, it's funny is I have a shirt. This is not what I was going to tell you, but I literally have a shirt that I wear, and I don't know how often I get stopped, and it right across my chest it goes, "I believe in magic," because I do.
Really? You have a shirt that says that?
Yeah, a matter of fact, when we're done, I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. It's in
Please.
script too, which I just love. And I had two of them. Somehow somebody got one of them, and it kills me that they got my shirt.
Oh, no. I was gonna ask you if I could have one, but
Well, you know what? I will find one and send you one. But I also use the term all the time, wonderment. I just do because I still
mm,
am that little. I still have that little kid in me. I really, truly, truly do. But what I was going to tell you that's related but not related is I have a son and two
mhm,
daughters, and my son and is very similar to me, lots of energy. He diagnosed with ADHD. Clearly, I had it. When I was growing up, we were just the hyperactive kids that got in trouble all the time.
mhm,
And what was interesting, we had a house that was down in Baja that was right on the water, which we had you could go snorkeling right in front of the house. And
nice.
my son would get down there, always wound up doing all these things, but and it was there was a lot of freedom for them to all three of my kids to go exploring. It was remote in a safe area, and my son would be out in the water. He'd be out there for hours,
Mm,
spearfishing or doing something, and within a day or two, he would completely slow down and he would be able to take naps and do all these things that he didn't do at home.
Yeah.
And we got that when we were growing up.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting, and so you had a perfect situation for him, a really great environment.
It was never a plan, but it is what it is. But I got off on track. So I want to get back to you. And one of the things I'm kind of interested in too, because when you were doing your studies down in Belize,
Yes.
what I read, you were studying coral and how the fish were protecting the seaweed and the coral from affecting each other. Can you get into that a little bit? I just found it fascinating.
Yeah. So, okay, so went to college, took a whole bunch of courses, liberal arts, right? So you're learning a lot of different things. And one of the things that really, really captured my biological attention at that time, I already told you about sort of the biology and art thing, but in biology, I was really, really interested in biodiversity, right? Like,
Sure.
why are there so many species in the tropics and so few species as you move away from the tropics in north or south? And so, I have always been fascinated by the ocean, and as a family growing up, we spent a lot of time by the ocean, and so I got very interested in coral reefs. I had never actually I don't think I'd ever seen a coral reef,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I was really, really interested in what causes the diversity of life on coral reefs. And so, in the 1970s, I had took scuba diving, had a chance to visit some places with reefs, and decided, okay, well, so I'm going to go to graduate school in ecology, right? Looking at the interaction among many, many different species. And what I want to study is, how do coral reefs get to be so diverse? And, why isn't there just like one thing that outcompetes everything else? And so I took some time off after college, worked for environmental consulting firms, tried to make some living, and applied to graduate school, ended up at Duke in North Carolina, working with a marine ecologist there. And I had the opportunity to take a coral reef ecology course one summer for like 2 months in Jamaica at the Discovery Bay Marine Lab. And there were students from all over the US and Canada. There were instructors from all over the world. And we basically spent all of our time either diving underwater or in the lab, looking at specimens, doing experiments, learning about all of these different creatures. And while I was in Jamaica, I got really interested in the fish and the many, many different species of fish that feed on, not on other fish, but feed on seaweeds. So these are herbivorous fish, right? So
Right.
they're plant-eating fish, and there's a lot of them in the tropics, and they are they include parrotfish, surgeonfish, damselfish, a whole bunch of different fish families, very, very diverse. And those are some fish families that are actually missing in the temperate zone. And in the tropics, there's also very little seaweed. And so I got interested in, so what effect are all of these different kinds of plant-eating fish having in a kind of detailed way? Like, not are they eating plants, but what plants are they eating and how does it affect the rest of the community?
Sure.
So, started in Jamaica, ended up working at a Smithsonian, a very, very tiny Smithsonian marine lab. I mean tiny, like it's on an island off the coast of Belize, rented out to the Smithsonian. It's called Caribou Key, and it has like 18 palm trees. There might be fewer now. And just a handful of scientists had the opportunity to work there at any one time. And and I was one of the lucky ones. It's on the island itself is located right on the barrier reef that runs all the way down the coast, that part of Central America, from the tip of the Yucatan
Sure.
all the way down that coast of Mexico through Belize down to Honduras. It's the second largest barrier reef in the world. And this is the 1980s, and that is it's inaccurate to say it was pristine, but it was a reef in really, really good condition. Lots of diversity, lots of corals, lots of seaweeds, lots of what do you call those fish? And
Grazing fish.
yeah, grazing fish, exactly. And lots of predatory fish too. So the ecosystem was relatively intact. The food web was relatively intact. And so yeah, I decided that I was going to do my PhD work on the effects of fish grazing in tropical reef communities, to look in particular at how these different species of grazing fish affected the interaction between seaweeds, which I already knew grew really fast, right?
Right.
They can be extremely abundant. They're all over, the Atlantic Ocean in the northern parts of it, and how they affected the competition between seaweed and corals. So corals obviously are the building blocks of the coral reef. Without corals, there would be no reef, and there would be no places for fish to hide. Corals make the whole, scientists call it structural heterogeneity. I'm really sorry about that.
That's a big word.
It just comes right out. But like all the little hiding places and everything that protect the fish and allow, there to be all that fish diversity. So without corals, there is no reef, and there is no reef life.
Right.
So anyways, it seemed like a good idea. And so I spent a lot of time underwater watching fish, different kinds of fish, parrotfish and surgeonfish, what they were eating, and transplanting algae from one part of the reef to another part of the reef, taking it from a place where there weren't any fish, and so there was a lot of seaweed, weighing the seaweed, putting it out in these little clothespins, right? Weigh the seaweed, attach it to a clothespin, cable tie the clothespin to a piece of coral rubble, and put it out on the reef, and then watch to see what eats it. So, I basically would just, I had a little underwater tally counter that I had wrapped up in a couple of Ziploc bags. And whenever one particular kind of fish took one bite, I'd press one button, and then other buttons for other kinds of fish. So I collected a lot of information on what they seemed, if you gave them access to these plants, what was it that they were eating. And of course, when you went out on the reef where these fish were abundant, you never saw these plants. So it's not the kind of thing that you could have done without moving the plants around.
Sure.
And I found that parrotfish really, really like certain kinds of seaweed, and surgeonfish really, really like different kinds of seaweed. So they had particular feeding preferences, which was a really interesting thing. And I also had an opportunity to do what ecologists call a herbivore exclusion experiment. So working in a sort of relatively shallow part of the back reef in Belize, which was an area that was mostly coral and very, very little seaweed. Any seaweed that was there was not quite microscopic, right? But really, 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 really tiny stuff that unless you scraped it off with a putty knife and then collected it, put it in a little dish and put it under the microscope, you couldn't really tell what was there, right? So this herbivore exclusion experiment involved a lot of chicken wire. So the same size chicken wire that people make their fish traps out of all over the Caribbean. We used that chicken wire to build fences that excluded herbivorous fish from large areas of the reef. And then we measured over the course of the next several months what happened to the corals and the seaweeds, the bottom dwelling community, over the next several months in areas inside the exclusion fences, so no herbivores, no grazing fish, and outside the fences, the usual number of grazing fish. And it was a really, it was a pain to set up that experiment, right? Because you're like setting up that you're unrolling this fencing and scaring the fish out of it, making sure the fish didn't get in, and every once in a while you get a hole, and then you have to scare the fish out and patch the hole, and so just maintaining the experiment was a lot. And then measuring, obviously, we had quadrats where we measured every single week the what was happening. It was an amazing thing because really, really quickly, like within, I want to say days, certainly within 2 weeks, you could already see that out of this scruffy little turf, things were growing up that looked recognizable. And they turned out to be a lot of the same plants that were dominating the habitat in other parts of the reef where there weren't any fish. So long story short, sorry about this, but it turned out that herbivorous fish have a really, really big impact. They actually they are controlling the competition between seaweeds and algae. Without herbivorous fish, algae grows from this little turf thing. It takes over. It overgrows the corals, and corals need light in order to they're
like crabgrass.
Plant animal, and it takes over like crabgrass, and it shades the coral and kills the coral. And so it was a kind of accidentally, it was an experiment that really predicted what would happen if people started fishing out not just the big, predators like the jacks and the snappers, but also started fishing out the parrotfish and the surgeonfish and the grazing fish.
Right.
And in fact, that's exactly what happened when those fish started getting taken in fish pots and, sold in markets. The seaweed started taking over. Many other sea urchin also,
right,
unfortunately at the same time kind of died off. And so the whole thing meant that now a lot of Caribbean reefs are dominated by seaweeds, not by corals.
So it's similar to taking the wolves out of Yellowstone because it gets rid of the balance.
Totally. And so, that was kind of a wake up call for me. It was like, oh, wow, this is really like ecologists can have
That's cool.
You can do something in academic science that really has a practical application.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FURREALPODCAST, covered by most pet insurance.
So I'm always curious about people's journey and how they got to where they went. So what do you think about that took you? And we got to get into what I would call lightning bugs, but fireflies. What part of that experience brought you to where you are now, do you think?
Yeah, good question. All right. So
I asked a good question. Remember, write that down. I asked a good question.
Good question. So, to be honest, it's hard to admit this, but one of the things after like 4 or 5 years of working in the tropics underwater, I was cold all the time, right? So I was always underwater. I was like waterlogged. I got tired of being wet and cold. And so I was thinking to myself, do I want to continue to work on coral reef ecology and spend more time underwater? Or, maybe there's something else that I could do. And during my, graduate school time, I'd been applying for grants and waiting for funding to come through that would give me another a couple of months down in Belize. So during that time, I was living in North Carolina. I was living out in the country with my then boyfriend, now my husband, and sitting on the back porch of our house one evening, with our dog Orpheus, just kind of
Great name.
as Black Lab. As it got darker and darker, it's like a thunderstorm was coming through or something like that. It was like unusually dark for that time of day. All of a sudden, there were all these fireflies in the backyard.
Right.
And I had never, as I said, I didn't really notice fireflies when I was growing up, but man, I noticed them that night. And it was like, whoa, what is going on here? And there were so many, and there was lightning, and they were kind of flashing in response to the lightning. And I just started walking around in this tall grass and wondering, wow, what's all this flashing? Who are they talking to? What are they doing?
Yeah.
So I, then ended up going back to Belize, but I always had in my mind, this is a really interesting thing. And when I read, went to the library, read all about whatever we knew about lightning bugs, fireflies at that time, I realized that there was a lot that we did know and a lot that we didn't know. And I decided that would be the question that I would work on for my postdoctoral work. And so I went back to Boston and started working on fireflies. And I did go back to the tropics and work on coral reefs a couple of times, and I've had students who did marine biology too. But since that time, I've been working on fireflies, on other insects, butterflies, flower beetles, things like that. But really interested in a question a little bit different than the grazing fish question, which is what makes some fireflies better at finding mates and passing their genes on to the next generation than other fireflies. So thing that, evolutionary biologists call sexual selection, not how they survive, really, eating better or not avoiding getting eaten, but how they reproduce better than others.
Well, before we go there, let's talk about fireflies in general, because
Yes.
I didn't realize when I started doing my homework that there's over 2,000 species. So can we get into that? And also, I know in the U.S. there's 100 or so. Let's talk about the basics so people understand that, and let's get into
Totally.
All their sex and all that other stuff that's going on with that life.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. That is a really good idea. And one of the things that one of the most common misapprehensions about kind of a myth about fireflies is that a lot of people think that you have seen one firefly, you've seen them all.
Right. That's what I thought.
Yeah, because, they all kind of look alike. They have different flash patterns, but hey, maybe it's just an individual being flashier or not flashier. So, yeah, most people don't realize that there's actually more than 2,600 different species of firefly around the world, which is an amazing number, right? That's a lot of different kinds of fireflies.
A lot.
And as you mentioned, in the United States, there's 170 different species of fireflies. And what ties all of these things together is that it's a whole family, a family of beetles. Fireflies are beetles, so we call them fireflies, or lightning bugs, but they're actually beetles.
Right.
And in this beetle family, there's a lot of different species, and their family, they share an evolutionary history, and they all light up in at least their juvenile stage. There are actually fireflies that don't light up as adults. They light up as juveniles, but the adults do not have the ability to make light. So I think a lot of people have probably seen, many of your listeners have probably seen beetles flying around that look just like fireflies, but they fly during the daytime and they don't light up. So that's a kind of firefly, and there's quite a few of them in the US, different species, that we call them daytime dark fireflies because the adults fly during the daytime, they don't light up. So that's one whole group. And then there's the lightning bug fireflies, the flashing fireflies that we're all familiar with.
That's where I wanted it. I'm glad you just said that. So that's the thing, because I grew up just calling lightning bugs.
Yeah.
So they're called lightning bug fireflies. Is that where the name comes from?
You could call no. I mean,
Okay.
let's not split hairs.
Okay. Well, I just wondered.
Yeah, I think you could call them fireflies, you could call them lightning bugs, it kind of depends on what you grew up with, and
Right.
either of those are fine. You can use those interchangeably, no big deal. But I guess my point is that there are some of these fireflies or some of these lightning bugs that don't flash at all once they become adults.
Right.
And so once you realize that, it kind of opens the door for, oh yeah, well, there could be more than one species. I've probably seen there's some very, very common day flying fireflies that look just like the flashing fireflies that you might, sometimes hold in your hand at night. But they don't the difference is that they don't light up.
They just look like a beetle. I mean, the body looks the same though, pretty much, right?
Body looks pretty much the same. They have
Yeah.
some differences. I mean, you can tell once you start looking at them carefully that, look, they fly like a firefly, but they look a little different. Anyways, so there's the daytime dark fireflies. There's the flashing fireflies. There's like a whole lot of species of fireflies, which is really cool.
Well, the thing that I read, which I apologize, I bounced, but I didn't realize the only ones I've ever seen, and I have like you don't have them when you were little. There's one specific time in my life that I remember this one night when I was out with my grandparents, my parents and cousins and stuff were there and playing with them. I have no other idea because I saw them all my life, but there's one night that meant everything. But the ones that I always saw, they were yellow, but I guess there's red and green ones too. Is that true?
Yeah, so there are so you're talking about the lights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with all of this diversity of, 2,000 plus species around the world, they also, there is some difference in the light that they make. And so some of them, especially the ones that come out early in the evening, have kind of a yellowish light. The fireflies that come out later in the evening tend to have a more greenish yellow light or green light. And I don't know that there's fireflies that have like a very red light, but there are ones that have orange light.
Okay.
And so there's little differences in the chemistry of the light production that produce those differences in the color. So the diversity of fireflies is one thing that, like the number of different species there are, that's one thing that many people don't realize. The other thing that many people don't really think about is, like, we're so used to thinking about fireflies, lightning bugs as these summertime.
Right.
They just mean summertime. They're these kind of things that come and then they disappear. And we don't really think about, like, oh, where did they go? And
Right.
what happens to fireflies in the wintertime?
I never did.
Yeah, so people don't really appreciate that, just like any other kind of insect, like a butterfly, right? Fireflies have a backstory. They go through stages. And in the US, fireflies, well, let's start at the beginning. They're like born from an egg, right?
Right.
And eggs hatch out into a juvenile form called a larva. Like other beetles, they have a larval form and firefly larvae in the US live underground. So they live in the soil, and they, while they're down there in the soil, they are not looking for mates. They're not doing anything. They're not doing, not doing courtship or anything. They're basically just eating machines. So they're looking for things to eat. And what firefly larvae eat is earthworms, snails, slugs. So they're voracious carnivores in their larval stage. Totally different kind of thing, right, than these ethereal adults.
Right.
They are spending up to 2 years in this larval stage, just basically eating whatever they can and growing. In colder parts of the U.S., they spend the winter, they go down below the frost layer, they become inactive, and then they just wait until the soil warms up again, and they start being active again, and they'll start eating, hunting again, and eating and growing and eating and growing. And so it takes these juvenile fireflies from 1 to 2 years to become big enough to finally undergo their final metamorphosis to the adult stage. And then in the spring, they will, the big larvae will find a nice little cozy spot in the soil or in a dead log or something. They will form the pupal stage like a butterfly chrysalis. And in about 2 weeks, they will come out as an adult firefly. And different species have different times of the summer that they come out, and also different times of night that they come out. So there'll be some species that there's actually a very common species of firefly that comes out very early in the spring all over the U.S., starts in the south, moves and comes out in a kind of a wave moving north, and they're the spring treetops flasher firefly. And then there's another species, when they are finished their courtship thing, another species will come out and do a slightly different flash pattern, maybe a different habitat, maybe a different time of night. And so by paying attention to where the fireflies are, when they're coming out during the season, and what time of night it is, you can begin to distinguish differences in the behavior of these different firefly species. So, backstory, yes. So that's a really, it's kind of a key thing to know about fireflies, is that the adults only live for like a couple of weeks, but the larvae, and the adults are flying around doing their lightning bug thing, the larvae actually live for about up to 2 years, and they're living underground. So very, very different lifestyle for the larvae, very, very different habitat. So
You got to be careful to grow up, because, like kids, you always want to be the adult. Well, those guys, once they're an adult, they only have 2 weeks to go.
yeah, that's right. So the adults are only, like, all their mind is on, the only thing they care about is reproducing, right?
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FURREALPODCAST, covered by most pet insurance.
I think in one of her TED Talks, you use this term, and I think it's great. It's a silent love song.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what they're doing.
Yeah. So, firefly lights actually, it's so cool, right? They make light. They make light. Can you imagine being able to like open your hand and make light?
Oh, yeah.
It's a very, very magical thing. And I think that's a lot of the appeal to us as humans about fireflies.
Sure, it's magical.
Yeah, it's magical. If we could do it, if like humans could do it, it would be like, oh, well, fireflies, whatever. But, because it's an ability we don't have, I think it is magical. And so what are they doing with those magical lights? Well, one of the main thing that the adults are doing is they're using their lights for courtship and to find mates, to attract mates, to choose mates. And so that's a really, really big deal. The fireflies that don't light up as adults, instead of using light, they use chemical signals for finding and attracting mates. So they
Kind of like pheromone kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So the females are giving off these chemicals, these pheromones or perfumes into the air, and the males are following the flying upwind, finding the plume of perfume that's coming off in order to find the location of the female. So that is mostly what firefly adults are doing with their lights. Firefly juveniles, remember I said that all the juvenile fireflies can light up, all 2,600 species of them. And they're clearly, they're too young to be looking for love. So they're using their light for a different purpose. And it seems that firefly, the whole ability to be able to make light, that bioluminescence in this group of insects, evolved as a way of warding off predators. So fireflies taste really nasty. I can tell you this from studies that have been done and also from personal experience. You do not want to taste a firefly.
Oh, you tasted a firefly? That's great.
Yeah, I didn't swallow it though. And so they have these chemicals that are toxic to vertebrates, including people, and also very, very bitter tasting, like really, really nasty. And so it seems that firefly light first evolved in the larval stage as a warning. So they're living underground. They are exposed to a whole bunch of, everything that lives underground that's looking to eat a small insect, which would include bigger insects, small mammals like, shrews and voles and mice that would be feeding on firefly larvae. So because it's underground, there is no, reflected light it wouldn't help to be bright red and orange and black like a monarch butterfly because nobody could see those colors. Instead, they use light as a warning. So instead of those warning colorations that we're used to in things that are above ground, these underground larval forms of these of fireflies use light as a warning. It's like a neon sign.
Well, like we have warning lights. I mean, that makes sense.
Exactly. At night, you have warning lights. Like it wouldn't help to fly a flag or anything because nobody could see it.
Right.
So they're actually using light as a warning signal. I'm toxic. Stay away. And so that's a really, really important purpose of firefly lights, and it turns out to be the reason that they first evolved, which is cool. It's like only later, like millions of years later, did some fireflies turn those larval lights into a very, very handy kind of signal system to find and attract their mates.
Well, one of the things I read was that the oldest one they found was in Burma, and it was 99 million years ago.
Yeah. So, by looking at the, by looking at modern fireflies' DNA, you could then, scientists have been able to reconstruct the evolutionary history of the firefly family and where they came from. And we think that fireflies actually originated about 140 million years ago. And as you say, there's fossil evidence from way, way, way back of fireflies that look pretty much like the modern day fireflies. So they've been around a long time. Even dinosaurs, right? They overlapped with dinosaurs. So, there's that, I don't know if you've seen it, maybe you have, the Disney movie, The Good Dinosaur, where the dinosaurs are watching the fireflies. It's that might really have happened. I can't imagine a dinosaur seeing these light up things at night and not being like, whoa, what is that?
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I want to ask, but the scientific name, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so I'm going to ask you, but I thought it was so cute the way the name is because it's Lampyridae. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah. So, the name of the beetle family is Lampyridae, and that's
Lampurity, okay.
yeah. And I mean, you could pronounce it any way you want. It doesn't. Nobody really knows.
It's a lamp. I just think
It's a lamp. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I think it's so cool.
yeah. And so many of the firefly names are like Lampiris or Photinus or Futurus or Pyractomina. They have really cool names. Yeah, I agree. The Latin names are cool. I actually like the common names. They're, in Texas, there are, I know you're based in Texas, and
Right.
so many of your listeners would be curious to know that there's 41 species
Really?
of lightning bug in Texas, and that includes all the different kinds, the flashing ones, the day active ones. There's also glowworm fireflies where the females can't fly at all. They just are sort of these worm-like glowing things called, and the males fly around looking for the females.
Well, I really want to get into this part because this is what you're specializing in now but I want to ask you, do a little bit more on one thing, but I'm noticing since where I live, I used to see a lot more and I'm seeing less, and we'll get into some of the reasons why that's where you're specializing in. But back to the whole idea of the lights and them mating. And what I read, and obviously I don't know anything. I just did some homework on it, but different different males have different blinking lights and all that, and some are more attracted to females than others. So, can you talk about that? And one of the things I just want to say is on your TED talk, you go, the females like the longer lasting lights, which I thought was hilarious. But
Yeah, people think that's
yeah,
funny.
we can all relate.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because a lot of my academic career was really, really delving into the details of um, Firefly courtship and sex lives. And so
Right,
we were very, very interested to know, like, okay, well, there's all this flashing and stuff. That's how they find each other. But what happens after they find each other? Like,
right,
what happens during mating? And, what happens after mating? What gets to determine, like, which of the males? We discovered that female fireflies will mate over successive nights with different males, and males mate with different females. So if a female is mating with a bunch of different males, like, which male gets to fertilize the majority of her eggs? And so we got very interested in, as I say, the details of firefly courtship and sex lives. And one of the things we discovered is that there are very, very subtle differences. There's differences among species in their flash patterns, and we can see that by eye. There's some that like have a single blink, 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 like a single flash that's repeated at intervals. There's some that have like double flashes. Blink, 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 double flash. And then there's some that have like triple flashes and so on. And so the timing of those flashes is how different species of fireflies tell each other apart. But you can see that with your naked eye, and you can time it with a stopwatch or whatever. There are also within a species much, much more subtle differences between males in their flash patterns. And it's not the kind of thing that you can see with your naked eye, but if you record those flash patterns and then analyze them with a computer, there are like, tens or, hundreds of millisecond differences in the flash timing of particular males that female fireflies seem to pay attention to. And the way we found this out was by, we call them like firefly opinion polls. So we went out into the field and found female fireflies, and then we played back using a computer and an LED light, played back different flash patterns to the females. And again, really subtle differences in the flash patterns. And we found, and females, so in general, not always true, but in general, for most of the North American fireflies, the males fly around and they signal, and the females are often sort of perched up on a leaf or a bit of grass. They respond to the male if they like that male, they'll respond with a flash of their own. And then the male flies closer, he flashes again, the female responds, they eventually get together, and so on. But females very rarely, for most of the species, they don't flash on their own. So it was easy to find this female firefly and then give her different male flashes, show her different male flashes, and see what she responds to. That's what she likes, right?
Right.
So these female fireflies were amazing. They were like just so discriminating, right? We had no idea that they would be able to tell the difference in these pretty subtle differences in the flash patterns. And so we were able to that's how we found out that for some species of fireflies, females like males that give slightly longer duration flashes. Really slightly, like you could not see it with your eye, but you can play it back, and that's what they like. So whether those males are like, they have more energy that they can put into their flash, or it's a signal of a larger nuptial gift that they might be able to give to the female, we don't really know. But females like those males and are more likely to respond to those males more often. In other species, like the double flashing ones, bleep, 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 bleep. Females like the males that have a slightly shorter interval between the two flashes. So depending on the species, there are small differences that make a big difference to female fireflies. So, that's an example of like really getting into the courtship and sex lives of fireflies. It was a lot of fun. But as you say, one of the things that that became apparent to me, probably starting about 20 years ago, was that many people in many parts of the world are noticing that there don't seem to be as many fireflies around as there used to be. And sometimes, people are not in the same place. They move to a city, whatever. But even people who are in exactly the same place as they were, when they were growing up, they say there just aren't as many fireflies around as there used to be. And this is a universal thing all over the world that people are noticing. And so it became kind of urgent to try to figure out what was going on. And so that is one of the things that we've been doing, a whole group of people, many people who are interested in fireflies in their science, in their biology, in their conservation, have been working on trying to figure out what the heck is going on with fireflies, which species are really declining, and which species seem to be doing well. And one of the things that we've been doing over the past just really about 5 years, is gathering all the information that's available, and for the U.S. and for other parts of the world, and beginning to identify the kinds of things that put fireflies at risk, and to identify the species of fireflies that are really, really declining. Some firefly species in the U.S. are doing great. There's one of my favorites is a firefly called the Big Dipper firefly.
Great name.
Phytinus pyralis, and it's in Texas, and it's all the way up and down the East Coast. It even gets out to, there's a population that's been found in Colorado. So they get around, and they are very, very abundant in big cities. They're in urban parks. They're in Central Park in New York, and Prospect Park in Brooklyn. I love Big Dipper fireflies because nothing really gets them down. They are a very, very resilient species of firefly. So we're not too worried about those fireflies. But there's some other fireflies that have very specific habitat requirements. And one of the things that's happening, it's really easy to see this happening everywhere, is like the places where fireflies used to thrive are disappearing, right? So as cities grow and spread out, as industry and commercial development spreads out, a lot of the places that used to be wild and used to have fireflies no longer exist. And once you understand like the whole firefly life cycle, it's pretty clear that if you destroy, like if you build for example, parking lot on top of a place where there used to be fireflies,
Sure.
you're going to wipe out not just the adults, but also the larvae and the whole life cycle. That's it for that population. So it's pretty easy to accidentally, let us say, exterminate a population of fireflies. They don't really get around very much.
That's happened with bats. These small little caves they're in and their construction, and they cover them, not knowing there were bat populations there at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So part of the other reasons for when you've got urban sprawl, which is what we're talking about, is also the light pollution. Because I said, well, why would that affect us? Their lights, but they need specific because they're sending their light to their sexy light to their sexy partner, and they can't see it.
Totally. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a really, really good point. So, we didn't really realize this until maybe 15 or 20 years ago, but for the flashing fireflies, light pollution is a really, really big threat.
Right.
And there is now, it's kind of logical, but now there's a lot of experiments and a lot of studies that have shown that even a little bit of light pollution, like, street lights or house lights or things like that, can really block the whole courtship communication that's going on in flashing fireflies. And so obviously the flashing fireflies are most susceptible to this. The ones that fly during the daytime, it's not that big a deal for them.
Right.
But what happens is that because they've evolved to pick up these signals against complete darkness, they can't really detect the signal against a much brighter background. And so males are less likely to flash when there's a lot of light pollution around, ambient light, and females are much less likely to respond. So the whole thing is kind of like a total quashes all the romance for fireflies, for the flashing fireflies, when there's a lot of ambient light around. So that's a big deal. So the loss and degradation of habitat, light pollution is a big challenge for many firefly species. Pesticides are a really big deal for fireflies because when you think about, like, the adult is just this, one little part of the life cycle, but they're spending 2 years living underground. So if you're, if it's a golf course and there's a lot of pesticides being sprayed on the golf course, or if it's a lawn and or a garden and people are putting pesticides on their garden to kill pest insects, those same chemicals, especially like the neonicotinoids, the broad spectrum insecticides, are also going to be killing firefly larvae, which are down there living underground. You don't see them, but they're there. So pesticides is a big challenge for a big threat to firefly survival. And then climate change is a big one too. I have not mentioned this, but in every stage of the firefly life cycle, they need moisture. So
Right.
the eggs need moisture in order to survive the 2 weeks before they hatch. The larvae need moisture. They need moist, but not like soaking wet, soils. The adults need moisture in order to be able to, the females need a moist place to lay their eggs. So when there's extended periods of drought, that means that the larval survival of fireflies in that area is going to decrease, and there'll be fewer fireflies the next year and the year after that.
One of the things I read, because all over the world now, they have all those like firefly parks so you can go see them at night and that.
Uh-huh.
And what I read was that's also a problem because some of these people that do that, they're not managing the insects correctly, and they're dying because even though they're doing this magical place, they don't know how to manage them that well, and that's also causing a problem.
Yeah, so there is an increased, I mean, yes, firefly tour, they're magic, right? So everybody wants to see them. And
Yeah, of course.
firefly tourism it's a big deal in many parts of the world, in Southeast Asia, in Taiwan, in different parts of the world, in even in the U.S. There's places where people where the fireflies are a big attraction, and so yeah. If those places aren't managed carefully, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like you want people to be able to see the fireflies and you want them to appreciate these, but you also want to protect the firefly populations.
Right.
And it's really easy for too many people walking through firefly habitat or bringing flashlights, other kinds of, headlights of cars, things like that, can really, really will really disrupt firefly courtship, and the firefly population will decline, and then you've got nothing. And so one of the things we've been working a lot with in the U.S., we work very closely with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation.
Mm-hmm.
It's an organization based in Portland, Oregon, and they have a big firefly conservation outreach. They work with site managers for tourist sites in the U.S. and also land trusts and other places where there are state parks and national parks where fireflies thrive. The Xerces Society on their website has guidelines for ways that you can manage your site so that you can protect the fireflies and then also let people see them. And actually, there's the Xerces Society. We do this all the time, is like trying to let people know, like, there's so many things that everybody can do to help fireflies. It's once you appreciate that there's many different species, that they have this whole backstory with this life cycle. So one thing that everybody can do is it's a question I get a lot, like, so what can I do to help protect fireflies? So providing a good habitat for not just the adult fireflies, but also thinking about the larvae and the prey, like earthworms and snails, like providing a moist habitat for adults to display and for the larvae to thrive and find plenty of things to eat. One of the things, and a moist place for the females to lay their eggs. So one of the things that's kind of, I would say, not great habitat for fireflies is lawns, just because very, very short grass like dries out very quickly. The soil dries out very quickly. So leaving grass longer, letting places go a little bit wild is much better for holding soil moisture even during dry periods. And then the firefly larvae, that are down there in the soil are gonna be doing better. It's kind of like once you think about, flash communication against a bright background, remembering that fireflies need dark nights is a really important thing. And a lot of people, especially with LED lights, have put up a lot of lights around their houses and security lights that go on automatically. Just reminding people, especially during firefly season, to reduce your light footprint, using motion detectors or timers to put the light just where and when you need it. Talking to your neighbors, I know a lot of people are interested in sort of like, dark skies, and can be very annoying if you have a neighbor with a very bright security light that's going on all the time. And just talking to your neighbors and, mentioning what you now know about how bright lights at night can impact firefly populations. Many people don't even realize that it's a thing, and so just reminding your neighbors about the need, how fireflies really need darkness. Everybody, I think, can be a lot more aware of reducing their dependence on pesticides, especially like things that kill all kinds of insects, these broad spectrum insecticides like neonics. Really easy to buy at Home Depot, but putting them on your lawn is going to not only kill the pest insects, but it's also going to kill the firefly larvae that are there.
I was going to say a couple things. One is that when you talk about the lights on your neighbors, there's another magical thing that we can't see with that too, and that's the stars. So if there's more light, so we can also get those other lights that are up in the sky.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just out last night in New Hampshire, and I'd just come up from Boston, and we went out on the dock last night, and just seeing it was a really clear night, and sunset is pretty early now, and so just seeing the Milky Way and all the stars that are up there, and it's really it's an awe-inspiring thing to be able to see the night sky and to see fireflies. And so you're right, just reducing, just turning out the lights and appreciating what we have in the darkness is a really it's a really cool thing to be able to do.
Well, the other thing that I want you to mention, because I know you've got some time limits, is your book. You mentioned it earlier, but tell everybody the name of your book. I also know, just so you guys know that are listening, in 2016, when the book was out, it won the award of Best Science and Nature book that you probably aren't going to mention, but you can tell everybody the title and how they can find that so they can learn more about it.
Yeah. So, I had an opportunity to write this book, and as I mentioned, it was really, really fun to be able to talk about fireflies in a non-academic way, and to be able to try to convey my sense of wonder and explain some of the cool stuff about fireflies. The book is called Silent Sparks, The Wondrous World of Fireflies, and I don't know, you can get it at your favorite bookstore, bookshop.org or wherever. And I really wrote it as for anybody who loves fireflies. That's the reason I wrote the book, because so many people that I sat next to on airplanes, or people that I ran into at the grocery store or whatever, that say, work on fireflies. They say, "Oh, fireflies, I love fireflies." And people really, everybody wanted to know more. And so it was a really, really fun project to spend 2 years writing a popular book about fireflies that is, I think, pretty accessible. It has really cool pictures and tells a lot of stories about how fireflies are viewed in different parts of the world, in Japan, and some of the cool features of their life cycle and their lifestyles, and also talks about the threats to fireflies and what people can do.
And here's a warning for everybody, a person warning. So if you meet somebody who doesn't like fireflies, you're probably going to hang out with them anyway. At the end of the day.
Mark, that's very funny because, actually, I have never met a single person who didn't love fireflies. I really haven't.
Okay, so we're at the end here. So as I forewarned you, I've got my silly joke. But for everybody listening, you guys know the story. I know you're cringing. And as I always say, if you've got grandkids, your kids, nieces, nephews, even your grandparents, or you guys want to be on the show and tell a silly joke that's related to the show, I will gladly have you on. And if you also have great subjects or whatever, just email me at mkyle@thefurrealpodcast.com. Because one is I feel bad for all the guests that have to listen to my silly jokes. And two is I hate telling them, and I really want you to tell them. So, Sarah, here's my joke of the day, and it's related to this thing. And hopefully you haven't heard it. And if you probably haven't heard it because it's so bad, but here we go. What is a firefly's favorite game to play? Any idea?
Oh, I do not have an idea. No.
Hide and glow seek. Anyways, that's how bad it is.
Pretty good.
Okay, well, at least it's related. But most importantly, hey, Sarah, thanks so much for being on the show. I know you're busy. You got all the things you're doing in the world that's there, but this is one that I really wanted to do, and I just really, really appreciate being on the show.
I really appreciate your having me on, Mark. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And then for everybody else out there that's listening, please keep listening. If you've got ideas, again, please let me know. But, without you guys, I don't get great guests like Sarah. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. For Real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Markakyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.